Welcome. You're watching a pre-recorded session that is part of the Sustainable Business Summit, Western New York Sustainable Business Roundtable's annual event. This year we're offering a virtual event experience featuring a hybrid of recordings and live panels on September 22nd and September 23rd. Next slide. The overall summit theme this year is the value of building business resilience. A fundamental part of resiliency for any organization is its capacity to plan ahead, to understand what sustainability means for your business, and to define and commit and measure progress. We have invited our partner P2I to walk you through the sustainability management cycle. So with no further ado, let me introduce our main speaker, Kim Boden. Next slide. So in her role as a pollution prevention engineer, Kim supports the business assistance programs with performing manufacturing process assessments, material and energy balances, and sustainability scorecard compliance. Kim leverages previous experience in various manufacturing engineering capacities while at Harris RT Communications and Microwave Data Systems. Mrs. Boden has a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering, a Master of Engineering in Engineering Management, and an MS in Sustainable Systems. Take it away, Kim. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Isa. Thank you for having me speak again today about sustainability basics to build your business and reduce your footprint. My colleague Ken Schlafer and I spoke a couple years ago at the summit on the same topic, and I'm happy to be back again today to discuss it again. We did get some feedback that maybe the audience wants to focus a little bit less on the whys and a little bit more on the hows. So I've tried to adjust the webinar to focus more on the hows. So despite that, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email is right there on the slide. I do always like to start with what sustainability is. I imagine the audience, many of us already know what it is, and these phrases here on the screen are very familiar to most of you. But sustainability is the intersection of finding solutions that optimize social, economic, and the environmental aspects. I also feel that it's very important as a company when you're looking at what your sustainability strategy will be, why you're doing it. The reason this is because it helps form the rationale behind what decisions you're going to make to reach your objectives. And I think that's really important when you're communicating either to the public or to your employees. Maybe the driver is internal. Maybe you have intrinsic values as a company and you may pursue a B Corp certification. Maybe your company simply has an interest in one of these focus areas for the environment, wastewater, energy, chemicals. Maybe you're a beverage manufacturer that uses a lot of water, and so you want to focus on reducing water. So these are still internal focus areas. Maybe there's a certain certification from your sector that is readily apparent in literature and in the market, and you want to pursue that. So maybe a driver is coming from external sources. Do you have customers that are making inquiries into through supplier scorecards about your environmental stewardship efforts, want you to be a more transparent supply chain, or some aspects of corporate social responsibility? And I had already mentioned that perhaps that there's an area of focus in your sector. Are you in the construction industry or cleaning product or food and beverage, where you may, food and beverage, there's a lot of requirements for supply chain transparency, cleaning products. Sometimes if you customers are looking for a specific certification to buy your product. And in construction industry, we're all familiar with the requirements for LEED enabling, the well building and the living building standards, declare C2C, and maybe somebody's requiring you to have an APD. These are all aspects associated with sustainability that come from external sources. So options to help you guide decision-making and how you might want to focus your strategies towards sustainability is benchmarking is often used. You can look at industry trends and best practices, for example, on a zero waste to landfill diversion rate standpoint or water use. You can also research national and international sustainability efforts, the UN Global Impact or ISO standards. The Global Impact has 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Focusing your efforts on those areas and perhaps identifying those and communicating those on your website or in any kind of communications shows that you're aware of these goals that are international. And I've highlighted a few of them that are more directly related to the environment, but as a company, you have the option of focusing on any of those areas. And by the way, you don't have to use any of these decisions that I'm suggesting. As a company, it's up to you on how you want to focus your efforts towards sustainability. But this is probably familiar to most of the audience. We introduced this last year, the Sustainability Management Cycle. And the first one where we're going to start is on Define and Commit. We really covered a number of reasons to define or areas of definition in the previous slides. Where are you going to focus and why? What does it mean to your business? And you want to articulate your mission and vision, which is going to be critical to obtaining management support and commitment. And many of you may notice that this is not unlike the DMAIC cycle used in Six Sigma strategies, the define, measure, assess, improve, and control. So we use a similar strategy on the sustainability management cycle. So for your mission, what do we do? Who do we serve and how do we serve them? I'm sure many of the companies listening in have done this for other aspects of their business. What is our core competency? What is your unique strength? How can you build on that? Again, if you're a company, a beverage company, you focus a lot on water use. So maybe you focus on a reduction of water. And exploring opportunities, monitor the business environment for market trends, threats, and opportunities. Again, that's from a benchmarking perspective. And then that can help you define your long-range plan for your company. So gaining management commitment in any internal strategy we know is very critical. Executives continue to have doubts over deploying a sustainability plan because organizations lack the business case to support sustainability investments and can fail to link sustainability with market risks and opportunities. So embrace data management, adopt a rigorous data management approach. It's important that sustainability professionals try to base their implementation of their plan on robust and indisputable evidence. Integrate sustainability into business language that resonates with executives. Articulate your sustainability strategy into the business vernacular. For example, for the supply chain executive, address sustainability as part of a strategic focus on logistics and procurement practices for both upstream and downstream suppliers. Demonstrate the materiality of sustainability to each executive. Determine the factors that are material to the business. It's critical that sustainability professionals identify those sustainability factors which are of relevance to their organization. For example, Deloitte rates water use as a low materiality sustainability factor for its business. However, for PepsiCo, it's one of the primary factors. Creating a sustainability vision. A vision statement looks forward of the company's purpose and plans. And some of the questions you may want to consider is what problem are we seeking to solve? Where are we headed? And what do we look like 10 years from now? Here's an example sustainability vision we showed in the last presentation. We just like this because it was all encompassing. Talk about investing in airport innovation, empowering our team, and collaborating with other communities. What I like about this vision is I feel like it touches on all the aspects of sustainability, society, the environment, and the economy. Investing in airport innovation. Try to incorporate all three of those aspects of sustainability in a vision. Measure, assess, and analyze. I've kind of combined the measure and assess and analyze components. I wanted to spend more time here to try and get companies to trigger some ideas on where you might and how you might pursue your sustainability strategy. We all know what a measurement is, a quantity that records a directly observable value or performance. And why do we measure? We measure so we understand where we're starting from, our starting point. How do we prioritize to take action? And it provides insight and potential causes of problems and changes to a process. I'm sure many companies that are listening in have done process flow diagrams for their entire process, but you can also use a process flow diagram to process out your sustainability focus. If you, for example, we've talked about water a lot, but we can talk about energy as well. We can look at and do a process flow diagram for where water comes into your facility and where it's used throughout the facility and where it goes out. You can learn a lot about simply drawing out where water is used and what processes they're used on. We'll talk about using bills, electricity bills. We're going to look at a water bill as well. And starting to track that information on a monthly basis, periodic basis. But I will recognize that sometimes we don't even know, we might not even know, do we keep our bills? Where do we have that information? And so one of the actions can be to simply figure out who keeps the bills? Do we track them? Maybe we should start tracking them. Getting a sense of where that information is being recorded or stored. Here's another water usage measurement. Look at your quarterly statement. Again, start plotting that information month to month. And by the way, we've talked about defining our sustainability focus. What are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on water? Are you going to focus on energy? Maybe you're not sure. Maybe your first step is to baseline a number of different things to see where are we and what areas are there the largest opportunity for improvement. So there's many different ways you can start. You can dig right in if you already know in one area, or you can look at several and trying to get a handle on your current performance. One thing that's very, very important is to consider normalizing data when you start tracking it. So here's an example of normalized water usage for a brewery. The red line represents tracked, simply monitored and recorded water use in the facility, and you can see that it rises over time. Whereas the blue line is normalized, and it's normalized gallon of water per barrel of production of beer. And so if you're looking at the red line, you see that there's an increase over time, and you might question, wow, we're using a lot more water. We should really look at that. But then when you look at the blue line, you can actually see almost a slight decrease in water use. So it's important to account for production volumes, and it takes out, it just eliminates some of the complexity of what you're looking at. A Sankey diagram is often used to share information as well. This information in this one was also from a brewery on water use, and this came right from a spreadsheet. So we didn't plot it per se or do a process flow diagram, but rather in order to show the flows, we put it in the Sankey diagram. And I put the name of the program here. This is a free tool. It's called Sankey-matic. You got to play with it a little bit. It's not difficult to use. And if you put information in, you quickly figure out how to use it. But I like a Sankey because I'm very visual. I like to immediately see where there's differences in performance, and you can easily see here where most of the water is being used. It's an effective visual for quickly understanding material flows and costs. You can add costs, you don't have to. You can add percentages, but costs are very important because perhaps you have a large band where water is flowing, but maybe you have the minimal cost. So if you can add costs, it's also very telling and informing. And this is also very useful for prioritizing improvement efforts. I wanted to put up a graph that showed that while social aspects of sustainability aren't necessarily quantitative, you can build a graph around social aspects. And I think that given the current environment that we're in right now with COVID, that sometimes sustainability aspects can really focus more around the social aspects relative to how employees are feeling. So measurements can capture social aspects. So we have a graph here, not my graph, not our graph that we use, but you can see it's Hewlett Associates, but the y-axis shows a percentage of employees who are engaged, and the x-axis is percentage who agree or strongly disagree with their organization is socially, environmentally responsible. Of course, you can change those questions and gauge it around where your focus is, but we can see that the more the employees are engaged, the more they feel that their company is socially, environmentally responsible. So maybe if we got these results, you might ask the question, what the employees that aren't engaged as much, are they being asked? Why are they frustrated? Maybe they've expressed themselves and they don't feel heard. So these are some of the things that you can delve into if you get some of this information. But again, it's moving away from the environmental components and more into a social. So I wanted to provide an example of where you can actually measure some social aspects. You could do that from a community basis as well. So assessments can include observations. There might be measurements, but you can also observe what's going on. Zero waste to landfill assessments are generally audits. We've done a number of these, and we do a lot of observations walking through facilities. So here we have some best practices, zero waste best practices, and they include consistent use of waste bins in labeling, in placement, and style. Inconsistent practices can cause confusion, send a message of a lack of commitment towards sustainable waste management, and that disincentivizes good waste management practices. Here's an observation that we've taken at a company that we can see that they're using bins that they already have, which is totally fine. We always encourage to use materials that are currently existing. They're consistent in style, but they have different labels and they have mixed contents. So if you can see on the left side, there's a bag label on one, and the other bin on the right says strapping only. And you can clearly see that there's mixed contents in that bin. Here we have a similar situation. We have consistent bins, and they're both labeled, but they're different labels. The labels look similar and they have similar colored text, and the likelihood of having mixed contents is very high. Here we have an inconsistent style of bin being used for trash, and the labeling is also inconsistent. So on the far left, I'm not sure if you can see, but those bins say garbage only. The bin in the middle says trash, and the one on the right says trash only. If you can imagine, if we had, I always come back to traffic lights. Our traffic lights are red, green, and yellow. Imagine if the traffic lights were all the same color of text and we had to read the sign. What's the likelihood of the increase in accidents that would occur if people had to read the sign and they were all the same color text? So here's just an example we threw together that uses those bins, existing materials for that company, but there's clearly different labels. They're distinct, they're color-coded, and there's pictures. After a while, employees don't need to read. They see the color and they know what goes in those particular bins. And when companies use...
Sorry, you might want to go back to the presentation mode. We can see a split screen right now. Perfect, thank you.
we can, when companies use a consistent bin location and coloring, it sends a message to the rest of the company that this process is very important and following these guidelines is important. It shows a commitment to the company, and employees are more likely to follow the practices. Here's an example of a waste bin system used at Miller Coors. This was in social media a few years ago. You can see clearly that there's 4 different style bins that they use: cans only, glass only, cardboard only, and trash only is the red. And the fellow there emptying his bin is also using a yellow bin into the cans only bin. And this resulted in a 19 to 30% reduction in waste at Miller Coors. Benchmarking is also something I mentioned earlier on, but it's helpful in establishing your goals and looking at, you know, if you're not sure where to focus on, if you've gathered information, say you've gathered your baseline, you've established a baseline for a number of different components, doing some benchmarking to compare how you're performing against other companies can highlight where the greatest opportunity is. So here's just an example. We looked at in a waste to landfill, zero waste to landfill project. We're looking at the benchmark, the recycling / diversion rates. Those are used interchangeably between P&G, Procter & Gamble, Estee Lauder, and Johnson & Johnson. And this recycling rate, diversion rate, looks like P&G is performing very well at a diversion rate of about 90%, and Johnson & Johnson is down to 50, which on first look would appear that they're not performing very well. However, this graph also contains the recycling rate, but we've added a normalized value here. We've added a value of total waste per dollar in sales. So now when we're looking at the graph, while Procter & Gamble has a high diversion rate, they also have a relatively high total waste per dollar in sales value of about 0.008. This is on the secondary y-axis. And Johnson & Johnson is less than half that of Procter & Gamble in terms of total waste per dollar in sales, and Estee Lauder is performing very well. So what does this mean? If we look at the total waste per dollar in sales, you're looking at how much a company is spending carrying material through their facility and throwing it away. So it's really a measure of your efficiency as a company. And while zero waste to landfill certifications often look for, and the consumer is often interested in hearing what's your recycling rate and what is your diversion rate, you know, zero waste to landfill, that's wonderful. Internally, at a minimum, you might be interested in looking at that other metric to track how efficiently you are performing. Here's another, this is also waste diversion related relative to breweries. We have 8 different breweries here, and we were tracking different diversion rates. And the size of the circle is reflective of how large or how many barrels a brewery produces, and the orange circle is reflective of our client at that time. You can see that the y-axis is quite tight. It's from 96 to 100%. And most of the breweries are performing pretty well, right? They're above 95%, and it's looking pretty good. However, if you know much about breweries, you do know that most of their waste is in their spent grain. And most of that, if not all of that spent grain, goes to feed animals, which is great. So that's a given, and breweries send it there. So we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to exclude the spent grain, because we already know that's going there? And what kind of, what would that reveal in terms of performance for these breweries? So this graph, we removed the spent grain, and now we can see that the y-axis, we were able to change it from 96 to 100 to 60 to 100, and we can see a larger disparity between those breweries. And if we were going to look for opportunities for improvement, I might focus on brewery number 3, who without their spent grain is still over a 95% diversion rate. What are they doing differently that we may want to leverage? And if it's, particularly if it's not a competitor of yours, if a company is not a competitor, you know, companies can be quite transparent on what actions they're taking because they want to communicate to the public what sustainability steps they're taking. So after you've done your baseline and you've identified your measurements and you've looked at where you want to focus, you want to define some objectives and targets. You want to consider objectives that align with the company vision and mission for sustainability. You want to consider targets that are challenging, but also achievable, measurable, include accountability, assigning responsibility to a group, department, or individual. You want to integrate objectives and targets into your overall business goals. So if you have a business plan from year to year, you want to integrate those objectives and targets into that. And then you want to draft a plan detailing your actions. What are you going to do? Resources and timeframes to reach objectives. Now, I mentioned earlier that as a company, you may not know where to start. So perhaps your action is to establish a baseline. Maybe an action is to figure out where all of your environmental components, say it's water, energy, waste, where is that information being tracked? Those are actions as well. An action doesn't have to be, we're going to take action so that we can meet a target of 20% waste reduction in the first year. You need to split out those actions into small steps, again, that are achievable and you can measure, you can track those. You can track it, measuring by perhaps could be, is it done or not done? It's very important to report and communicate. Why do we communicate? Because it provides a status with goals and objectives. You can include that in management reviews. You mitigate conflict. I know that when I used to work in manufacturing, if there was a new incentive, a new strategy that was communicated to employees, and they don't hear anything about it, that, you know, you hear comments like, well, I thought that was going on and I haven't heard anything, so I don't know what's happening with that. You increase employee engagement, create better client relationships, result in a more productive and talented workforce. If you communicate to your employees and they see that the company is committed, you're going to gain, or you're going to attract, a more talented workforce. Communicate internally. During management reviews, company-wide newsletter, or on social media. We showed this slide last year, 2 years ago when we presented the last time. There's often there's boards usually that you can see in companies, and you can add information to that about the environment and goals that you're looking to meet and what steps have been taken to meet those goals. You can communicate externally through annual reports, newsletter. You can use reporting standards, the ones that I've mentioned here, the GRI, CDP, and GHGP. Those are, again, clearly related to greenhouse gas reductions. You don't have to use those, but there are standards out there that provide a framework for how to communicate and also provide some tools with how to calculate greenhouse gas emissions. Improve and control. So now we've gotten to, we've defined, we've got commitment, we've done a baseline and some measurements. Maybe we've done benchmarking, maybe we have not. But if we've established where we're going to focus and we've established a target, how then do we proceed in improving? We suggest to utilize existing systems to evaluate and track actions taken to reach these objectives and targets. Most companies have a corrective action system, a quality management system. They have management reviews or continuous improvement teams. Some companies do have green teams. Maybe they want to consider a green team, but if there's an existence of a continuous improvement team, or I would imagine that most of the audience listening here thought of exactly where they would focus of who might be accountable to work on these systems to improve. But trying not to establish something new and complicated is helpful in using existing systems. So we talked about benchmarking, but I just want to mention that you can benchmark best practices across facilities. So internally, what are other processes doing? Walk around, talk to other areas and see if they are separate, is there an opportunity to leverage each other's strengths in certain areas? Benchmark and research best practice externally. We talked about benchmarking. We looked at different, the performances of companies from their water consumption and their waste. And oftentimes when you're looking at performance metrics, you can often find information on how they're meeting those metrics or what actions they're going to take to meet those metrics. And you can get nuggets of good information on how you may want to proceed. Engage employees for feedback and idea creation. Employees have tons of good ideas and they know as well as anybody where a problem is originating from, and it may not be measured, but there's often an opinion or a general sense of either what could be done or questions they would ask or where problems are occurring. Consider higher resolution data collection. Perhaps you have done a process flow of where the water is being used in your facility throughout, where it comes in and where it goes out, and perhaps what process is using the most water. Maybe you have to put meters in or measure water or measure energy consumption on a more resolute area. You may have to invest in some equipment to take better measurements. And then once your targets are met, you want to establish controls to maintain that performance. I mentioned engaging employees and recognizing success. Engaging employees, and we already mentioned this, can reveal valuable insights for improvements. Employees feel valued. And it's really important to recognize small and big wins. You can consider friendly competition between departments, encourages employees, and it fosters continual improvement. And moving forward, you want to evaluate your goals and targets for appropriateness. Often they need to be changed or adjusted. You want to redefine, expand, and commit as appropriate, and continue progress on the sustainability management cycle. And I want to thank you for your time this morning. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions, you can email me. The email on this slide is a general email to P2I. If you mention my name in the email, it will be directed to me. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thanks everyone for tuning in. So we're looking forward to meeting you all virtually at the Sustainable Business Summit Reimagine.